Carlos Nelson with Cascade Media, and today we have Miss Charlotte Clark on our Urban Professional channel. Welcome to the show, Charlotte.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Charlotte, tell our audience a little bit about yourself. And as I always say, go back to kindergarten, but go back as far as you can. And I'd like for you to mention some of the mentors that help you get to where you're at in life, just in general. Floor is
Okay.
yours.
Um, yeah, so I'm Charlotte. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I uh going as far back as I can. I had a couple of teachers in my elementary school years. I shifted schools between a private school to a public school from third grade on to sixth grade. So I had a couple of teachers in my earlier years at a private school. Um, Mrs. Liu is one of them, and she uh, was one of the first teachers that understood that I was a fast learner. The school I was in was private school, but because I think it was in the earlier years, they didn't want to necessarily like separate kids based on skill sets. But she was one of the first teachers who understood where I was kind of at, and based on my parents kind of pressing, I think, as well. She gave me extra materials for me to learn from. And that was kind of the first teacher that did that for me. And then when I transferred schools over to a public school um, called East Hills ISA, which is no longer around, um, third grade through fifth grade, I spent um, a couple of years learning the math in that class. And then I spent a summer, I believe, between um, fourth and fifth grade, basically learning all of fifth grade curriculum from a teacher, Mrs. George. She spent, I actually don't remember too much, but I spent multiple times a week coming to her house, learning whatever math I need to learn across a year in 3 months. So then I could go to a middle school in fifth grade and learn sixth grade math. So those were kind of the, I guess, important teachers in my earlier years. But I spent most of my high school, also middle school and high school, learning more advanced math classes. I always kind of had an
What high
aptitude
school
for
did you go to? Tell our audience.
the high school I went to was Ellis School. It is actually the private school that I went to when I was in elementary, K through second grade. And then I went to their middle school in sixth grade after I graduated from the public school. And then sixth grade on, I was at Ellis.
What was the
So
racial makeup?
it is
Per
I'm
se.
not really good with numbers, but I would say it's majority white. There are, I don't know, I would say less than 10% maybe of Black um, and Asian uh, people. So it was really an interesting kind of space to be fitting in to. I had trouble, I think, socializing um, between eighth grade and 10th grade. Um, but it was kind of really the only environment I knew in a lot of ways. And so, um, educational wise, it was great. Socially wise, it was a little wonky. But I think now looking back on it, I can kind of understand the intricacies of being a teenage girl in an environment in which they are trying to push education and learning, and all the kind of social, personal things that come with that.
It wasn't a whole lot of social life for you in high school.
No, I was sheltered is maybe the best way to call that. I did was not sneaking out anywhere. I was not really going to parties. I was not drinking at an early age. I was working really hard. I was doing my homework, and I was watching a lot of TV.
After high school, run that down.
Yeah, after high school, I basically could have either majored in computer science and computer engineering, or I was really thinking about majoring languages. Partially through high school, my dad urged me to take Spanish. I was taking French up until that point. And so for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, I was taking French and Spanish. Upon the time of graduating high school and moving into college and even just applying to colleges, I still wasn't really sure if I wanted to go the engineering route or go kind of the language route. So I'm applied to both sets of colleges. My grandfather went to MIT, and so MIT was definitely the school that I really wanted to go to. I had a lot of family in Boston as well, and so that's the one of the schools that I got accepted into, and then the school I ended up going to in the fall of 2010.
And what did you do? What was your major?
My initial major was double majoring in electrical engineering and computer science. Midway through, I was avoiding all of my electrical engineering classes, so I switched over to computer science, and that's what I graduated with.
What was the racial makeup in that class?
Again, not really good at percentages. MIT is probably one of the smaller schools than a lot of like the really big ones. Um, I would say maybe like a quarter, 25% makeup of people of color. Um, that's actually maybe not correct, but as someone who's not good at
I
numbers
thought it was about
and statistics,
15%.
yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a larger majority of Asian Americans and international students as well, than like if I was just categorized African Americans. But again, I am not good at seeing a
Yeah,
group of
that's all right.
people and trying to
I'm just trying to give
compare
my
it.
audience a little picture of where you come from and how you were educated and how you've risen. So after college, tell our audience a little bit about that, what you decided to dive into.
Yeah, after college, I was really focused on, I wanted to really help people. I had spent the last couple of summers interning and doing assistive technology type work. And so that was kind of the main space that I wanted to be in. But there were not at the time a lot of companies and a lot of work that was being done in the adaptive assistive technology space. So I ended up kind of broadening my scope to any kind of company that was mission driven. Um, so I had put my resume on a bunch of sites, I think as you did at that time, and just kind of waited for people to call me. I did get a call from a recruiter at Cerner, who wanted me to apply as a software engineer. And at the time, I'd never heard of Kansas City, didn't know Kansas City existed. And so went through the interview process. I was supposed to fly out here, an interview, I think over a couple of days. I missed that flight. So I did all of those interviews virtually. And so when I actually did get the offer to join Cerner, I had not been here, had not seen the city at all, but accepted the offer. I was going to move in the next couple of months. So did actually drive down here to visit, but it was very much like a pick a spot at the map and be like, okay, I guess I'm going to live there for a couple of years and see how that worked out.
So tell our audience what you do now.
Now I do consulting, a lot of product and startup consulting within
What kind of
2020.
products?
So I have stayed kind of in the technical software space. And I work with a lot of non-technical founders who have decided that they want to build tech startups. but don't necessarily have a lot of experience with how do you build software. So it is all those like software type platforms, and as I like to call them, the product and how do you build all of that out.
Can you name some of your clients?
I can't, but I've worked with a number of early stage startups in Kansas City. A lot of them come through the Technology Venture Studio, which is a department of UMKC's Innovation Center. And one of those programs is Digital Sandbox. So if you know of any of those Digital Sandbox
Digital
funded companies,
Sandbox. I had them when we first started. What's up, Kansas City? What's his name that runs the Digital Sandbox? Or do you remember?
I believe Jeff Shackelford was the one of the original uh, founders or directors, coordinators of Digital Sandbox.
I know
So yeah.
we had them on that was like 8 years ago or what have you. And I was trying to work with them on some things. This is when they were trying to have free internet for urban core. And one of the guys that worked with me had been over in Spain, uh, and they had free internet. Now we're talking about 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And uh, he came back, asked me for some money to set something up like that here. And you know where the Lincoln Building is? On 18th and Vine.
Oh, okay.
All right. So he put a receiver on the top of the roof, and I got the signal from downtown somewhere, but I could supply free internet to anybody in that building. And now uh, on 19th and Paseo, the Esteemed Village, they have provided for everybody. They were in the same building as I was, and they took it to another level. Uh, so I think how important do you think having access to the internet for people of color or the bottom three-fourths of our community is?
I mean, I think it's super important. I think that because we're in a space and an age in which a lot of the information we're getting and a lot of the things we're learning are from kind of the access of any and all education through the internet, that it is super important. I would say that there's a smaller number of people who are learning just from books or from non-digital technology. So yeah, I'd say that it is pretty important. I think also because a lot of people are also migrating to the internet and virtual communities to find people like them. So I think there's a lot of additional connectivity that comes from having that connection
How do
too.
you like see you because you're in uh this real deep, but virtual communities you talked about, and really uh the average public, they're just really over the last 5 years just getting into virtual communities. What do you think about that concept, and how well do you feel it that portion of technology is coming along?
I think that it's coming along well. I've done a little bit of research in this space a couple of years ago, and I can't really remember everything, but I think that the biggest thing is that anyone can kind of make a community, anyone can put it out there that, you know, that they want a community of people or they want to attract people that like whatever niche of things. And I think even people I know who have created those types of communities have been surprised by how many people have then joined and how that community has grown. So I think it's really amazing that you can kind of be like, I like this one thing, and I maybe in my vicinity or area, I might be the only person, or I can't seem to find anybody who also can like enjoy that hobby or that TV show, whatever that is. But then you might find, you know, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who had similar experiences to you, and or, really are passionate about the same things. And so it kind of provides, I think, that camaraderie that possibly a lot of us were missing, when there were not so many virtual communities, and you're growing up as whoever you are, and you're liking things that not everybody has
There's boy
been
now.
in.
You remember I told you I don't do no research on these interviews per
Mhm.
se. Now that we're talking about that, a bunch of things just came through my head. So I wanted to ask you about the AI threat for one, how you feel about that, and I wanted you to, because on that virtual community, there has been so many movies. Because how when I look at virtual community, I look at Matrix,
Mm.
and I wanted to ask you: do you think that uh, our our society right now really is living almost in a virtual community, even though we got the reality, but uh, through this technology, people are not really looking at what the reality is, and they're diving into virtual reality to escape. That's what how
Mm.
I'm looking at humanity in general for the most part. What's your take on some of the things I just asked you?
Yeah, I mean, I just want a disclaimer that I have limited AR VR knowledge, and also a little bit of AI. I did learn a little bit, and I understand it enough, but I am not deep into it, which is kind of ironic being in a technology space and um, not really being. I am not. I do not love AI, but as far as the AI space, I think that it's really interesting, that right now AI has really blown up, and everyone is like, AI is taking over and AI is the future. But I think prior to the blow up, AI has been very consistent in what it does really well and what it doesn't do really well. And I think the basis of that is the models in which an AI is being trained on. So um, if you are trying to build an AI right now, it's really easy to build that. But for any AI you're going to build, you need tons of data. And the data you need needs to be as diverse as possible, and it needs to be um, just a lot of it. And I think that for people who see how AI works now, it's either that it's super amazing or it doesn't quite work. And it all kind of comes back to the data it's being trained on. A few years ago, I went to a talk through a WakandaCon conference right around when Black Panther had come out. And it was a really interesting talk about how AI as a concept and how a lot of people want to use AI is very much rooted in slavery and white supremacy. And the great and not great, but interesting part of that was that so many people see like humans up here and AI down here, and very much that like AI is going to do, or replace humans. They're going to do things that like humans are asking. Either humans don't want to do, or humans would rather have an AI do. Whereas if we were to kind of flip that, we can have AI and humans on the same level, and like AI work alongside humans to be able to do parts of their work efficiently, versus trying to do all of the work efficiently. And so I think about that talk a lot, because I think that there's a lot of ways in which, even now with AI and everyone talking about AI and wanting to build AI and use I think we're always going to come to a point where everybody wants AI to do things for humans and for humans to not think at all about it. But I think probably the ideal goal is that AI does some things well, but there's like humans are taking that work and are able to do things with it. And I think, especially because AIs are only as good as the data it's being trained on, there's always going to be mistakes, because you can't necessarily have all of the data. All of the data isn't perfect, just like all software isn't perfect. So I think there has to be like a level of checks and balances with whatever you're using. So that's my rant on
Yeah,
artificial
well,
intelligence.
let me say this: when I'm asking you different questions, I'm not asking you to be expert on that. For the most part, just like I'm asking you questions, I feel that you have enough knowledge on these different subjects that you can give a rudimentary uh, uh, concept to our audience of what's really going on. And what really surprised me in your response just now, you talked about AI and white supremacy, and I just learned some of that 2 or 3 days ago. I'm looking at some things, and I was like, how is that associated? And then because my statements are constantly that Europeans have controlled all forms of communication since the 7th century, and you have to be able to connect those pearls to make the necklace so that you can really see at the root of a lot of this is white supremacy.
Right.
So talk about what you're interested in, what you're doing right now personally. Do you have any personal hobbies that you're working on, or projects you're working on yourself to develop?
Yeah. So since I've kind of quit corporate, I am always doing at least two or three different things. Um, so um,
Cutoff king. They call me the cutoff king. Why did
oh,
you
okay.
quit corporate?
I quit corporate in 2020. I had basically in the year up until about September of 2020, I was learning how to build a business. The business initially was supposed to be helping small businesses automate internal process, and then I switched it into being a fractional CTO, which is a chief technology officer for early stage startups. And so I decided to launch that in July of 2020 and basically spent 3 or 4 months just like trying to figure out how do you offer consulting services, which services do I offer? And around September, October was when I decided that I didn't necessarily want to be in corporate and also do a job, um, on the off hours. And was then fortunate enough to find an early stage startup who um, was founded by two non-technical founders trying to build a really large piece of software. And they were initially looking for an engineer, and we talked, and I was like, you guys need a CTO, and like, here's what I can do for you. And so that enabled me to quit Cerner and join a startup, and then also negotiated in that startup that I was going to do the startup part-time and then do consulting part-time. So since then, I've always been doing two or three
How
different
you
things.
like being your own master?
I think it's interesting. I think a lot of people are like, oh, I want to be my own boss so that I can like do whatever. And actually, I think it's the opposite. At least for me, I have a lot of things that I'm passionate about and a lot of things that I want to be doing. So I probably spend twice as much time as I did at a corporate job um, doing like work related things. But because it's all stuff I really like doing, it's all kind of in the realm of fun and enjoying.
That was my next question because me being an entrepreneur and what have you, and being able to do, you work harder, but you enjoy what you're doing, so it's really not work to
Yeah,
a degree.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And what would you say to? Because I cater to people of color audience. What would you say to the youngsters out there that are in high school that might see this interview on their choices?
I mean, I think that there's a lot of choices. I think when I was in high school and even in college, it felt like there were two choices for me. It was, find a job or go to school or take more schooling. And since becoming an entrepreneur, it's made me realize how like many more choices there are. I am of the opinion that I kind of wish that I pushed college a little bit later. That I probably would have taken it a little bit more seriously if I had like spent 2 or 3 years working. So that is all to say that like the two choices you have are not get a job or, get more schooling. You can work for yourself. You can work for other people. You can, pursue that hobby as like a side hustle and maybe possibly make some money from it. I think there's a lot more choices too than just the two, and you can always come back to those at any point.
That's where I find when I say Europeans control 100% of all communications, that the communications that most of us are receiving are almost like you be automaton. Go to school and go get a job.
Yeah.
And there's a cornucopia of things that you could do if you apply your brain and say, oh, I want to go in this direction, or I want to go in that direction. But I don't feel that that's out there really visible. And they really don't show you really successful people besides the rappers and that type stuff. They show you how you can come up real quick doing this, but they don't show you really how you can come up and have the choices as you talked about your history after you assess some things. He's like, oh, I can do this myself. It's a little harder on the front end, but once you get situated, it's from my perspective, it's much easier on your mental health.
Definitely. Yeah.
So, in wrapping this up, what would you leave our audience with? Some words of wisdom.
Words of wisdom would be, as someone who is constantly helping other people who have ideas and build companies, it is a lot of work. It is definitely not for the faint of heart, but I think that any idea you have that, might be a really interesting business opportunity, or just something you want to explore, I would say just go and do it. I think especially in this space, there's a lot of visible successes of like people who have made it really big, people who have gone really quickly and things have kind of exploded. But there's value in taking your time and slowing down and really figuring out what that space is, what that idea you have, and how it kind of takes shape. And then you can kind of move forward and make that dream a reality.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. And as we always say here at Cascade Media Group, when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself. Good day.
Program is brought to you by the Kansas City Business Association.